should have happened, and I can tell you that files are only to be destroyed according to policies and procedures that are set out at the time and, of course, change from time to time over the years.
To say that your personal attention has been more on the Home Office review of lost files and less on the wider non-statutory inquiry.
I think, I mean, over the last period, yes, but essentially, as Permanent Secretary, I'm as involved in policy as I am in process, so I wouldn't say it's more one than the other. Mm-hmm. But of course, the internal review was a piece of work that I commissioned and therefore obviously gave it my attention.
And the external inquiry, if I may call it Home Office, the lead department for that, and you take sort of responsibility for supporting and facilitating.
Yes, indeed. So we'll provide whatever secretariat support and other expert support. We'll liaise with other government departments to go to the point that Ms Blackwell was asking about earlier, to ensure that they provide all the information the inquiry wants. So yeah, we're very much going to support the inquiry's work.
And earlier you exhorted other public bodies to search and share relevant documents. Would you include in that the Government Whip's office? Well,
in fact, I meant when I said that to refer to the comment you made in response to the statement yesterday. I think all bodies who may have information, either as I was seeking, that may be relevant to criminal investigations or that may be relevant to the Butler Sloss inquiry, should carry out the kind of exercise that I carried out last year, mm-hmm. with proper independent scrutiny, and provide that information as determined. So I would extend this to all bodies.
And if you're looking at an isolated sort of file or documents, even a few files, you wouldn't necessarily know if they were going to be helpful to a particular police inquiry if you hadn't been informed of that inquiry. So would you therefore encourage such bodies to share any potentially relevant documentation with the Butler Schloss inquiry, at least in the first instance?
So either that, or if it relates to specific allegations, then with the police. And so most of the material we've shared is, I think, what the police might regard as intelligence that might just support an inquiry they're pursuing. I don't know what other information they have available to them, of course. And of course we'll respond to any further inquiries they make, and I would encourage others to do the same. So if it's specific, with the police; if it's more about systems and process, then with the Butler Sloss.
And for the police, I think there are concerns as to how linked up those police intelligence systems are, and particular inquiries that there may be links that the relevant forces don't know about. Can the Butler Schloss inquiry be a sort of point of contact for sharing that information to ensure that sort of dots are linked up that may not be done currently?
Well, I think in terms of the individual criminal investigations, again, I would say that the best, and I think this would be their view, but obviously it's for them to decide. I think the best route would be into the police. The police are working to deconflict the various investigations that they have going on across the country to ensure that there aren't overlaps or gaps between their investigations. And so it should be possible if material that for example, I or another institution, mine or another institution, thought was relevant, was handed to a particular police force, they should be able then to judge whether or not that might be relevant to another police inquiry, for example, because they would be privy to that in the way that outsiders like us would.
You're referring to registrars and changing policies for authorising document destruction. Are there sort of protocols and guidelines that apply across government in terms of document destruction?
Yes. So the Grig system was a system that was a government-wide system, and the National Archive now essentially set the overall policy parameters. Although obviously different departments will have different immediate procedures, but fundamentally it's a common system.
And should the Government Whip's office be compliant with that cross-government protocol and guidance?
I think, Mr. Reckless, that you're taking me beyond my competence.
Well, Mr. Sedwill, who else can I address these questions to? You've just said at the beginning of my questions that you and the Home Office, you're the lead in terms of facilitating this. If you could advise me as a parliamentarian how the Whip's office can be required to answer that question in the same way before a select committee, I'd be grateful for your advice.
I don't know enough about how the Whip's office manages its information, frankly, to give you a very intelligent answer.
Can I just give you one input into that before you answer then? An ex-whip wrote about 1996 that there was a dispute within the whip's office whether notes for whips were the personal property of the whip concerned or government property, and it was in response to that sort of concern that a new policy in terms of document shredding was instituted. And I would just like your answer as to whether that policy, ideally what it is, but whether it's compliant or should be compliant with the government protocols.
Well, I mean, the Home Office has got the lead for supporting the Butler Sloss inquiry, because I don't have the lead for the overall file management systems across government as a whole. And I simply am not familiar enough, Mr. Reckless, with the procedures in the Whip's office to say very much. I think it really is a matter for them and the...
Would you encourage them to share those procedures?
But as I've said, I would encourage all institutions, including all government institutions, including, as I said, I did mean to refer to your comment, to put themselves in a position to share information with the police and share information with the Butler Sloss inquiry. And I think all institutions should do that.
Including to state what their document destruction processes are, how those have changed, and in particular the reference I made to 1996, the question I have is, does that apply to historic documents? Were they all shredded at a point in time? Should we get the answer to that?
Well, again, Mr. Reckless, I don't really want to tell this committee what questions you should be asking and who you should be asking them of. I don't think that's proper for me to do.
Well,
but of course you're...
And you think we should have someone in, please tell us.
Well, I think Mr. Reckless is clearly pursuing a line of inquiry here that he's interested in. I think the committee must make a judgment about that. But to be clear, I don't want to sound evasive. It's just that this is outside my department. And I can only really answer for
you are the lead department for these inquiries?
Well, for the inquiries, but that's why... But
you said the inquiry should consider these matters.
Indeed. But this is then a matter for the inquiry themselves about how they wish to do so.
But you don't wish to tell us about the mechanisms?
I don't know enough about the mechanisms, Mr. Chairman,
but you have agreed it would be useful for those mechanisms to be shared.
Again, I think all of this kind of information, there's no reason this shouldn't be transparent.
Thank you. My final question, Mr. Sedwill, do you pivot between instructions from ministers and the long-term interests of the Home Office?
Do you know that was the first time I'd seen that phrase when I read it in the media this morning? My job is to deliver this Home Secretary's agenda right to the last day of this Parliament. Of course, part of that agenda is to ensure that the Home Office is in good shape to deliver not only her agenda but her successor's agenda into the future, and that's the way I would describe my obligations to her as my Secretary of State.
Thank you.
That sounds extremely loyal.